So today's topic is 25 different types of interviews. There are a humpty number of interviews out there, but I'm covering only 25 different types of interviews. I believe this topic would be useful for all the job seekers out there, like whoever are the candidates who are looking out for openings and who are planning to attend interviews in various organizations. I believe this topic also would be useful for all the HR professionals out there, or even the normal business people, other professionals, because you can choose when you're covering a 25 different kinds of interviews in a module. That means you can pick and choose which type of interview you want to use in your organization for the recruitment of a specific position. So that is the advantage of or that is the intention of creating this particular video module, because I believe this would be useful for the HR professionals as well as the people who are seeking job openings or who are expecting some interviews in the near future. And again, as always, I'm not going to elaborate on all the different kinds of interviews. I'll just give a just a brief description on the various types of interviews. For more details, you can always Google them and find or do your own research and get additional adequate information on any topic that you're interested in. But this, the intention of me doing this video is, as I mentioned, just to give you an understanding that there are different kinds, varieties of interviews out there which can be used by professionals and organizations, and individuals can expect to attend these kind of interviews in your job seeking time. I have personally been involved in all these kinds of interviews, either as an interview or an interviewer. So I'm not only discussing this here on just after doing a bit of research, but also from a personal experience point of view. So you're getting this information from a person who has actually experienced or executed these kind of interviews. So it's just not simple talk or simple blabbering. It's with experience. So yes, let's get into this topic. So again, 25 different types of interviews. Let's look at what is the first kind of interview I have included. Of course, obviously, the first type of interview I have mentioned here is tele-interviews or telephonic interviews, especially for overseas candidates, or used as an initial screening of the candidate. It's like just calling up the candidate and trying to understand what is the basic communication skills, a bit of knowledge on the subject, and the expectations, availability for interview. So the basic things are covered in the tele interview. So this first round of interview, we call it initial screening interview, or if the candidate is outside a country, in a different country, we start with a tele interview. Now the second interview is video interview or virtual interviews. These interviews are considered as a substitute for face-to-face interviews, and the materials or the applications used for video interviews are usually Zoom meetings, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. All these applications are used in video interviews. Again, I'm not going to elaborate in depth, but if you people insist, if you want to know more in-depth knowledge on a specific topic, please put me a message. I'll be more than happy to help. But otherwise, you can do your own research. But let me know. I don't. If I start elaborating each topic, then it will be a very lengthy module of video, which I don't. I think it may be a little boring. So I'll just keep it very brief. But please do put me a message if you people want in-depth ideas or personal experiences on this. So now the third type of interview is automated interviews. You will answer a preset set of questions or a series of questions through a specific platform. And the platform usually used by organizations, the names of these platforms are Sonru, Cameo, Highview. AI-assisted tools are also being implemented nowadays by the organizations for the automated interviews. The fourth type of interview is individual interview or personal interview. The usual face-to-face interviews were usually initiated by the first round of interview. So the first round of interview where you are invited for a face-to-face interview are called the individual interview or personal interviews. The fifth point is panel or committee interview. More than one interviewer is representing the organization, And the representation may be from different departments such as the technical department, HR department, and basically this type of interviews are used to understand your teamwork skills, your group discussion skills, and most of the corporates nowadays are going for panel or committee interviews. So in one shot they can understand the candidate in a better manner compared to a face-to-face interview or just different rounds of interviews. Now the sixth interview is behavioral interview. When a lot of interviews, in behavioral interviews, a lot of interaction is made. The candidate is made to do a lot of interaction with their colleagues or clients, and the colleagues and clients can be external or internal, that is within the organization, or a client who is representing an external organization. So these are basically to understand how well you can interact with the clients, and these types of interviews are done by councils and non-profit organizations. Now the seventh type of interviews are called technical interviews, basically to gauge the technical capabilities, problem solving skills, thought process, and usually these technical interviews are either 1 hour or 2 hours or a whole day. It can be a full day interview as well. Eighth type of interview, HR interviews, wherein HR managers try to learn about the qualification, skills, personality, variety of questions to understand how the candidate thinks. So that is the part on HR interviews. Now the ninth type of interview are called group interviews. Group interviews are in which multiple candidates are interviewed simultaneously in a group setting. Usually airline industries or hospitality industries, usually conduct group interviews because they go for a mass recruitment campaign at a specific place, and they try to recruit as many people as possible because a hotel or an airline industry need multiple people at the same time. So as part of a mass recruitment campaign, they generally go for group interviews. Now the 10th type is case interviews. Candidates is provided with a case or a challenging business scenario where he or she is supposed to analyze the situation and provide a solution. So this type of interview is called a case interview. Now basically to analyze the testing basically to test the candidate's analytical skills. So that is why case interviews are used by organizations. Now the 11th type of interview is called stress interview, wherein a candidate is provided with a combination of confrontational questions. The candidate is put under a lot of stress to understand how much stress the candidate can handle. And these type of interviews are generally done for the senior or the mid-management positions where the managers are supposed to take in a lot of stress, when they're supposed to complete their project in a specific time. They're supposed to manage a huge team of employees. So in those positions, the managers are expected to tackle immense pressure and stress. So when we are recruiting for that kind of positions, generally stress interviews are conducted to analyze the stress-taking capacity of the candidate. The 12th type of interview is called structured interviews, where an assessed tool where every part of the process is consistent. Okay, structured interviews, not an assessment tool. Okay, structured interviews are a type of assessment tool where the interview process is completely structured. There is no wavering from the structured process. The interviewers has to stick to the entire structure. They cannot waver. So those are called structured interviews. So all candidates are, and in structured interviews, all candidates are asked the same type of questions. And usually structured interviews are done in career fairs. Again, part of when organizations go for a blue collar manpower recruitment, they usually go for structured interviews where every candidate is given with the same set of questions. There is no wavering from the set of questions. That is called structured interviews. Now unstructured interviews is the opposite of structured interviews, where is an assessment tool where you have an opportunity to waver from the structure, where the interviewer is at liberty to ask additional questions apart from the questions already mentioned in the format of the interview. So that is called unstructured interviews. The interview questions are not, all the interview questions in an unstructured interview are not decided beforehand, but there will be a set of questions which are already decided. Informal interviews. A non-formal job interview often held in a neutral setting like a cafe. Probably to understand the candidate better. And usually the informal interviews are conducted when there is not a definite opening, or the organization is expecting an opening to come up in the future, and the managers would like to decide on the candidate and keep candidates as backup if they're expecting an opening to happen quickly. So that is where informal interviews occur. And informal interviews are generally done by, like small to medium organizations where there's one single owner who is handling maybe 20, 30 or even 100 number of candidates. So means 100 number of employees, a small to medium setup where the owner himself or herself interviews all the candidates without a proper HR setup. In those where the owner themselves is managing the HR setups and accounts and all those things, in those situations is where usually they do an informal interviews. Now the 15th type of interview is informational interview. Now informational interviews are done usually in industries like entertainment industry, radio kind of places where people are recruiting for radio, films, movies, where the candidates is trying to understand, get more information about the industry, because there is no structured format for the work in an environment, in an entertainment industry. So the candidate need to understand more about the industry, about the job profile. So you're trying to get more information from a highly experienced person in the industry. So that is why informational interviews come into picture, where you're trying to connect with the professional of a specific field due to your interest in that particular field. You are trying to learn about specific career paths in that specific industry or organization. So like as I mentioned, in entertainment industries and all, there is no specific format for the job or the acting and all that. So when an outsider is coming to join that particular industry due to the interest or talent, they can meet with the experienced person in the industry to understand better regarding the job profile. So these type of interviews are called informational interviews. Now the 15th type of interview is the 16th type of interview is one-on-one interview, where a candidate is interviewed one-to-one. There is one interviewer and one candidate, and the results of the interview does not depend upon the performance of the other candidates. Usually interviewers shortlist a bunch of candidates after the first or the second or whatever times of interviews. They shortlist a couple of candidates and they compare the results. But whereas in a one-on-one interview, there is no comparison, because the candidate is being interviewed for a specific position and they're trying to understand the talent and skills capacity of this particular person for this particular position. So there is nothing called a comparison between other candidates. So that's why this type of interviews are called one-to-one interviews. Again, these kind of interviews generally occur in for political positions and universities, colleges, or all these one-to-one interviews are conducted because each candidate's skill level, qualification level, experience level will be much different from the other person. So that is where this one-on-one interviews comes into picture. 17th type of interview is competency interviews. Questions are asked to understand your specific skills in your previous experiences or your approach towards problems, tasks, and challenges. Basically, to understand your competencies. So competency-based interviews are again for specific job openings, especially in the technical field. Apart from the technical evaluation, competency-based interviews are also are done to, especially if the job requires the technical person to handle the management part also, then usually the HR or the other interviewers conduct a competency-based interview as to analyze what is the management skill of the candidate, along with the technical knowledge, how much of management skill this particular candidate holds. So that is when a competency-based interview comes into picture. Now the 18th type of interview is called lunch interviews. To evaluate how you interact in a social setting, usually conducted in restaurants, cafes, or any other public places, usually done by small, medium enterprises. So lunch interviews are, what do I say? Again, can be used by organizations where there is a lot of social interactions. Where if an organization has a consistent clients from overseas and they conduct a lot of meetings with international clients in a social setup, like over lunch in a restaurant, in a hotel. If there's a lot of interaction with the international clients in a social setup, then you would need managers or candidates who are capable of handling a communication in a social setup. So to evaluate what will be their performance in a social setup, usually interviewers conduct a lunch interview to to analyze or evaluate a candidate's performance in a social setup, because people perform differently in an office environment, in a home environment, in a playground. So people behave differently. So if you want a person to spend business meetings in a social interactive manner, then you need to understand if that person has that particular skill and if that person is capable of handling or adapting to such kind of job performances. So that's why this kind of interviews are essential. Now the 19th type of interview is called off-site interviews. Off-site interviews are generally done in off-site locations. For example, if an organization's head office is situated in Silicon Valley, California, US, or anywhere, and the branch is trying to, and they have branches maybe in Dubai, maybe in in India or any part of the world, and they want to recruit somebody, probably to recruit to their head office or not. So the interview will be conducted in their off-site office, which is not in their home country. So this is basically called off-site interviews, where the interview is not conducted in their actual office but in a different location. But those locations can be their branches. So it's not their actual head office site, but an off-site site. Now the 20th type of interview is called semi-structured interview. This is a qualitative research method, okay? Semi-structured interviews are basically qualitative research method that combines a set of predetermined questions. So in semi-structured interviews, you have a set of predetermined questions that you would be asking, but again the interviewer is at a liberty to explore further with different types of questions to understand the candidate's capacity or skill level or experience level on different subjects. So that is why semi-structured interviews are used by different organizations to explore specific themes or responses further on various subjects related to the job. Traditional interviews. Traditional interviews are basically one-on-one interviews where the interviewers ask a series of questions, often from a script or a predetermined set of questions. These may be or may not be further clarified in a second or a follow-up interviews. These are the interviews that used to occur, all the traditional interviews that occurred 20-30 years ago. All the interviews that occurred 20-30 years ago were the traditional type of interviews where the interviewers ask you straight one-on-one questions from a list of questions. There is no additional questions. You answer them and they think it matches their requirement or fitment, the candidate is hired. So these type of interviews are called the traditional interviews. Now, working interviews. Working interviews are hands-on interviews where employers, invite the candidates to the actual work environment. For example, if a factory is hiring their couple of employees for a specific job, then they invite these people to the actual factory and make them do the work, the actual work that they're supposed to do. The interviewers or the organization ask the people to actually do the work. So these type of interviews are called working interviews, to understand how the candidate reacts, responds to the actual work environment. So basically this is done in where the interviews, where the organizations are trying to recruit for a factory. These types of interviews are done. Now the 23rd type of interview is called individual interviews, talking with one person at a time. This is usually done when the candidates comes through references or internal transfers within the organization. Okay, individual interviews are interesting because the interviewer already knows a bit about the candidate. It's not like other interviews where the interviewer is completely unaware of the candidate and is meeting the candidate for the first time. So individual interviews are like the interviewer already knows a little bit about the person, because either the candidate came through a reference or is an internal transfer within the organization. So the interviewer knows a bit after going through whatever the references has provided by the person who has recommended this candidate. And of course, if he's working in the same organization, then obviously the interviewer would know the the skills and the weaknesses of this particular candidate. Then the 24th type of interview, HR interviews, to understand your cultural fit to the organization, attitude, adaptability, honesty, professional goals, commitment, salary expectations, loyalty, personal plans, capacity to move locations to work. Okay, I'm seeing something here. Okay, I have mentioned HR interviews twice. I'll have to check what happened there. Okay, and the 25th type of interview is exit interview. Wait, I missed something here. Okay, what happened was, like, the 24th type of interview was not supposed to be the HR interview. It was supposed to be career fairs. Okay, career fairs are usually done like either through an advertisement in the newspaper, or flyers are distributed in any organization. Nowadays, I think even social media is being used for a career fair, to publish the career fair, wherein a specific date and time is published by an organization asking for candidates, maybe in this specific age group or this specific qualification with so many years of experience, are supposed to come. And on a general initial round of interview, or maybe there can be 1 or 2 rounds of interviews in career fairs, we would never know. And there can be some group discussions, and usually there will be discussions or speeches on various topics related to that specific organization or the industry. So career fair type of interviews are usually done for freshers, like people or the candidates who are freshly out of colleges usually attends career fairs, and the organization targets career fairs to recruit fresh candidates out of colleges and universities. Now the 25th type of interview is called exit interviews. Exit interviews are usually done by organizations when the employee is leaving the organization. So HR, usually it is done by the supervisor of that particular candidate, and then the final exit interview is done by the HR professional, to understand why the candidate is leaving the organization and how was the experience of the candidate in the organization. So these are the 25 different types of interviews. I hope this is useful for all of you. And And what do I say? uh, do best. I wanted to discuss so much more on this topic, but I think I'll leave it here. What do I say is, do all the best in your interviews and give your best shot. And I'm sure, okay, and there can be situations where you may fail in the interviews, but don't take it to heart. Keep on trying till you land your dream job and or dream business. There are humpty number of organizations out there. Keep trying, keep excelling, and be the best version of yourself. Thank you all for your time here once again. Bye bye.